Welcome back to 21 Grams. This is Wind Down Wednesday. This is the part of the week where we stop pretending we're fine. Not in a dramatic way, just in an honest way. If you have a glass handy, go ahead and pour. This simple act is your cue to pause and leave behind the rush of the day. This is your cue to be honest and give yourself room to reflect. If you don't, that's fine. Take a breath. I'm glad you're here. Because tonight is not about fixing your whole life. It's about noticing something that's been shaping your life quietly. Your words, not your captions, not your I'm good in public. I mean, those words you use when you're alone. The ones you say in the car, the ones you whisper in the mirror, the ones you throw at yourself after a long day like it's nothing. And here's what I want to start with. Most people, they don't realize they're cursing their own lives because it doesn't sound like a curse. It sounds like normal. Most people don't realize they're cursing their own lives because it doesn't sound like a curse. It sounds like normal. Let that settle. Now, tonight, I'm drinking Malbec. Luca Old Vine Malbec, early 2022 batch. A Malbec is the kind of wine that walks into a room like velvet with a heartbeat. It pours dark as midnight, and it tastes like blackberry, plum, and black cherry with a soft, smoky warmth. And underneath, there's a hint of earth, cocoa, and spice, making it rich, smooth, and very quietly powerful. It lingers like the last note of a song you don't want to end. And I like that for tonight. Because this conversation is like that too. It's not loud. It doesn't need to shout to be felt. It's the kind of truth that lingers. Let's slow down and let's talk about it. Why Wednesday is where the real you shows up. There's something about Wednesday. Monday has motivation. Tuesday has some momentum. But Wednesday is where the mask slips a little. Is where people start saying things like, man, I'm tired. I can't catch a break. I can't catch up. I'm messing everything up. Negative thoughts like, I'm not where I thought I'd be. And that's not because you're weak. It's simply because Wednesday is the middle. And the middle is where how do I put it? The middle is where the mind starts reviewing the week you just had like a judge. It starts building a case against you. The middle is where the mind starts reviewing the week like a judge. It starts building a case against you. And the language you use in the middle of the week matters because it tends to be the most honest. Not the most accurate, but the most honest. And that's where things get dangerous. Because what you repeat when you're tired becomes the truth when you're calm. What you repeat when you're tired becomes the truth when you're calm. Hold that thought. Words are not just words. You've heard the phrase, words are just not words. We've heard it a million times before. It sounds good, but it's not real. Words are how your brain organizes reality. Words tell your nervous system whether it's safe. Words tell your mind what to expect. Words tell your body whether to brace or breathe. So when you tell yourself, I'm always stressed, I'm always broke, I'm always behind, I'm always the one who, you fill in the blank. You don't realize it, but you're setting the thermostat in your life. You're telling your brain, this is the normal temperature. And the brain loves normal, even when normal hurts. Because familiar pain is safer than unfamiliar peace. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar peace. That's why some people finally get a calm moment and immediately ruin it with a thought like, something's about to go wrong, or it's been quiet lately, or everything's been going right. That's not intuition, that's conditioning. And when we spoke on Monday, I mentioned that that's the power of the tongue. The power of the tongue is conditioning because your brain doesn't understand emotion. Your brain understands repetition and it creates an identity around that. There's the quiet curses, the ones that sound like personality, right? Let's talk about the quiet curses, the ones that don't sound dramatic. They sound like you're just describing yourself. I'm bad with money. I'm not consistent. I'm not a disciplined person. I have bad luck. I'm terrible at relationships. I'm just not that kind of person. The list can go on forever. Those sentences, they feel small, but they're not small because they don't describe a moment, they describe an identity. They start to condition you. And once something becomes identity, it becomes self fulfilling. Why is that? I think it's because your brain starts making decisions that protect that identity. If you believe you're not, or if you believe that you're bad with money, you avoid looking at your finances. If you believe that you're not disciplined, you stop making plans that require discipline. You believe you're unlucky, you stop recognizing opportunities because you expect disappointment. But you don't do this consciously, it's just automatic. This gets done automatically. Your brain doesn't know when you're joking when you say it, it only knows you said it again and again, creating a repetition. And like we mentioned earlier, the brain understands repetition. So it conditions and it creates an identity around those repetitions. Let me make this real. Imagine two people, they both get rejected for something they really wanted, a job, a relationship, chance, same outcome. Person A says, okay, that sucks. I wanted that, I'm disappointed, but I'm going to adjust. Person B says, you see, this always happens to me. I'm not meant for good things. I'm always the one that loses. This is the same event, just a different language. And that language decides what happens next. Person A, the one that's willing to adjust, feels hurt but keeps moving. Person B, the one that was negative, the ones that kept saying that it's not for them, that person starts shrinking. Not because they're weaker, but because their words made a home for the pain. Your words, they don't just express feelings, they build rooms for feelings to live in. And some of us have been building whole houses out of hopeless sentences. The way you speak after mistakes, that matters. Here's a moment I want you to pay attention to. When you make a mistake, what's the first thing you say? Not what you say publicly, but what you say in your head. Do you say, okay, that wasn't great, I'll fix it? Or do you say, I'm an idiot, I always do this, I can't do anything right? And listen, I know those lines. They're fast, they're automatic, they're almost inherited. Even I've caught myself slipping into the tone that I realize it. I realize I'm saying it. Even I've caught myself slipping into that tone without even realizing it. But hear me, that voice, that voice becomes the environment you live inside. Your inner environment is hostile. You'll always feel like you're surviving yourself if you continue to think that way. And that's exhausting. Some of us aren't tired from life. You're simply tired from the way you talk to yourself in life. Let's rearrange that language because there's truth versus harm. And I think this is our turning point, right? This is not about being positive. This is not about pretending. This is about the difference between truth and harm. Truth sounds like I'm overwhelmed, I'm hurt, I'm disappointed, I'm nervous. That's truth. Harm sounds like I can't handle anything, I'm broken, I'll never get it right, I ruin everything. Truth is specific and harm is permanent. Truth is specific and harm is permanent because truth helps you understand your moment, and harm, it tries to define your entire identity. And when you speak harm long enough, you start treating it as truth. That's how people end up living small. Not because they didn't want more, but because they didn't think they were allowed to. So let's practice the language shift, right? Let's make this usable. We're not doing fake affirmations tonight. We're doing language upgrades, okay? We are not doing fake affirmations tonight. We're doing language upgrades. Instead of saying, I'm always anxious, let's simply say, I'm anxious right now, just this very moment. Instead of saying, I can't do this, let's say, this is hard, but I can learn. Instead of, my life is a mess, we could say, I'm in a season of rebuilding. In prior episodes, I spoke about seasons, right? Some seasons aren't meant to grow, some seasons aren't meant to accomplish goals and create great mindsets and go out there and be the best version of you. Some seasons are meant for surviving, some seasons are meant for rebuilding. So instead of saying I'm behind, let's say I'm in my own timeline because behind that implies that there's a scorecard. And most of the time, you're losing a game that you invented. Remember that part. Instead of saying I'm behind, simply say I'm on my own timeline. Because if you think about it, if you use the word behind, that implies that there's a scoreboard and someone or something is keeping score. And most of the time, you're just losing a game that you invented. You're losing your game of thought. You're losing your game against language. You're losing a game against self respect. But then, why does soft language feel weird? For some people, speaking softly to yourself feels unnatural. Like if you're not hard on yourself, you're going to fall apart. Some of us were raised on pressure, criticism, high expectations. So you learn that if I stay strict, I'll stay sharp. If I stay strict, I stay sharp. But strict doesn't always make you better. Sometimes it just makes you scared. And fear isn't discipline, fear is simply survival. Wind Down Wednesday isn't about pushing you any harder. It's about helping you stop bleeding internally from your own voice. It's not just how you talk to yourself, it's how you talk to your life. There's epic layers here. Some of us are in relationships where the language is heavy, not screaming, just cutting. Sarcasm leaves behind bruises. Dismissiveness, that makes you shrink. Things like, relax, I'm just joking. Words matter. And if you live around language that makes you feel small, your nervous system learns small is safety. Then you bring that voice back into yourself, right? Start to believe that. You start finishing sentences for them, even when they're not even in the room. So tonight, ask yourself this: what language do I live around? What language do I absorb? What language have I normalized? Softness doesn't come with silence, and it doesn't mean silence. It means choosing language that doesn't wound you. Because if you sit in smoke long enough, you start smelling like it. So let me clarify this for a second. It's not always how you talk to yourself, it's always about how you talk to your life. If you're in relationships, you have to speak life because language is heavy, right? If all you're doing is screaming, cutting, using sarcasm, being dismissive, you start to shrink. But if you bring positivity, if you change the language, if you learn to recondition the brain to create a new identity just around the soft language you're using for yourself, things like, it's going to be okay, I'm going to do better, I can do this. You start to normalize and absorb and live around better language. Everything going to start to change. And the analogy that if you sit in smoke long enough, you start smelling like it. It's the same in language. You say things long enough a certain way, it just becomes who you are. So let's change that language. Let's work on it. So let's do a midweek reset. I got 3 questions for you. What is one sentence that you've been repeating about yourself lately? And where did you learn to speak that way? And if you rewrote those and you're honest, what would you say instead? Let's try this. The old sentence was, I'm always tired. Let's rewrite it like this: I've been carrying a lot. I need rest. Old sentences sounded like, I always mess things up. Let's rewrite it as, I'm learning. One moment doesn't define me. The old sentence where we mentioned earlier, I'm behind. Let's rewrite that as, I'm building quietly and I'm not late. That's it. That's the reset. Reset the language. And start speaking life. There's something powerful about speaking towards who you are becoming. Not shouting, not forcing it, just declaring it quietly, like a heartbeat you can trust, right? I'm working on myself. I'm allowed to grow. I'm not who I was. I don't need to rush healing. Those sentences, they don't demand perfection. What they do is they invite progress. And progress is how lives change. Not overnight, not one big moment, but in the daily language that stops harming you. Up until this point, we spoke about language, we spoke about the power of the tongue. Let's recondition our brains. Let's use better repetitions on how we do things. Let's continuously declare that we are working on ourselves. We are allowed to grow. We're not that person anymore. We don't need to rush healing. Let's invite progress because progress is how lives change. So let's take the last sip. Before you go, I want to leave you with this thought. You are always listening to yourself, even when you're silent. And the voice you live with most is your own. So if your words feel heavy, don't just say, what's wrong with me? Ask yourself, what have I been saying to me? Because the power of the tongue is real. And you don't have to curse your life to tell the truth about it. You can be honest and still be gentle. Let this episode settle in. Let this episode settle in you the way a good truth does, warm, quiet, and steady. Let it linger, not because it hurts, but because it softens you. This is 21 Grams, Wind Down Wednesday. Speak to yourself softly, and let that softness be a form of strength. And like always, I'll be here for the next conversation.